From London, and welcome to this Global Government Forum webinar, Mission Critical, using moonshots to drive innovation in government. My name is Rich Johnson, and I'm the Executive Editor of Global Government Forum, a media publication focused on bringing public and civil servants from around the world together to share best practice. And we're delighted to be joined by IBM as the knowledge partner for today's webinar. And this is a webinar on a very interesting and pertinent topic. Governments face unprecedented challenges in what I think has been called the age of permacrisis, ranging from responding to the coronavirus pandemic to developing solutions to the climate crisis. And these all require responses at speed and scale that would have been unthinkable in many governments just a few decades ago. So this approach requires, or these responses require innovation. And to help unlock that innovation, many governments have begun to experiment with using missions or moonshots to help drive innovation and drive progress. These missions or moonshots are grand challenges responding to public policy problems, and they are intended to act as a framework for innovation both within and across government, and in how central government works with other public authorities and the private and third sector. And this session is going to look at how governments can use these moonshots or mission-based approaches to drive innovation, to make the changes in these important subject areas. And we'll look at how they can be developed, how to frame them, and how they can catalyze innovation, and how to make sure that innovation is then spread and used across government and indeed wider society. We've got a really great panel to discuss this topic today and share lessons of how this might be done. But before I introduce them, I also want to invite you to get involved, to put a question to our panel. How does your organization approach innovation? Do you think that more could be unlocked through different approaches? What do you want to know about how to develop mission-based approaches or moonshots in government? We've got a panel that's uniquely well placed to answer any queries that you might have. So please do use the Q&A function that you will see wherever you're accessing this webinar to put a question to our panel, and I will share as many of them as we can. But before we do that, we're going to meet our panel and then hear some introductory thoughts from them. So let me introduce them. First up, let me introduce Amanda Wilson, the Director General of the Office of Energy Research and Development at Natural Resources Canada. Amanda is the Director of the Office of Energy Research and Development, where she is responsible for a number of Government of Canada programs and initiatives in the area of energy innovation. In this capacity, she serves as the Canadian representative on the Mission Innovation Steering Committee and is the chair of the IEA Committee on Energy Research and Technology. Prior to taking her current role in 2017, Amanda held the position of Director of Operations for the Smart Cities Challenge at Infrastructure Canada, where she played a key role in the design and launch of that challenge. So welcome, Amanda. It's great to have you here today. We're also joined by Rowan Conway. Rowan is a policy fellow and visiting professor at University College London's Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose. Rowan leads the Transformation by Design module of the MPA in Innovation, Public Policy and Public Value at the Institute. And between 2019 and 2020, she worked with Professor Marina Mazzucato to lead the Mission-Oriented Innovation Network at the Institute, which convened global policymaking institutions such as the Scottish Government, the Swedish Innovation Agency, the New Zealand Department for the Environment, the OECD, the UN Development Project and the BBC in a range of exploratory design projects focused on mission-oriented innovation. So hello and welcome, Rowan. And we're also joined today by Christina Cabelli, the Executive Director of IBM Global Public Sector. IBM Global Public Sector is focused on offering all of IBM's technology and services tailored to clients in government. And Christina provides deep industry expertise to help government clients accelerate their transformation, the transformation of their business and organizational activities, as well as their processes, competences and models to fully leverage the changes and opportunities of digital technologies such as hybrid cloud and AI. Christina has more than 25 years experience in the public sector and has led the development of the IBM Garage for the public sector, which is an end-to-end model for accelerating digital transformation and innovation in government, focused on how to generate innovative ideas and how to rapidly turn those ideas into business value. So it's a great panel we've got, as I said, to discuss this topic of innovation and kind of specifically the use of missions and how they can help catalyze it. So as I say, please do submit any questions that you've got for our panel, and we will get to them shortly. But first, I'm going to ask Amanda to kick us off with some opening comments. Amanda.
Great. Thanks so much, Richard. And thank you so much for the invitation to be here. It's a pleasure to be able to share with you today some of the reflections on how Natural Resources Canada, and specifically the office where I am Director General, the Office of Energy Research and Development, is using a mission-based innovation approach to advance Canada's net zero goals. So I thought I'd start off by talking a little bit about how we define a mission and what using mission-driven innovation looks like in our view. So mission-driven innovation is a break from a conventional focus on fixing market failures. And of course, we need to address market failures like spillovers that undermine the case for investment in the area that I work in, innovation and research and development. But mission-oriented innovation really does go beyond this. So it suggests that governments have an important role to play in providing direction for innovation, not just in accelerating its pace. So it means that we need to focus on problem-specific complex challenges. Missions necessitate an all-hands-on-deck approach centered on collaboration. But something we've played around with quite a bit and tried to find the balance correctly is that they need to be broad enough to engage the public and attract cross-sectoral investment, but at the same time, they need to remain focused enough to involve industry and achieve measurable success. So by collaborating with a range of actors across all sectors of society to better address these challenges, we can better ensure that we're rowing in the same direction. So sometimes we talk about finding the shared objective. So where are the things where we can all agree on what the outcome needs to be, and then how do we work together to aim toward it? So by doing this, we find that we're better able to discover new and novel solutions. So rather than leading with solutions or specifying how to achieve success, missions really do lead the development of a range of different solutions in order to achieve a given objective. So mission-driven innovation requires us to pick the problems rather than focusing on picking the winners, which is something governments talk about sometimes. So why do we need missions, and specifically, how do we use them in the context of the work that we do here in OERD, or the Office of Energy Research and Development? So Canada, as some of you might know, has ambitious climate goals. So we've committed to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. There is legislation to that effect, and to reduce emissions by 40 to 45% from 2005 levels by 2030, which, you know, is shockingly not that far away. So cross-sectoral collaboration, setting joint goals, identifying common priorities, and sharing knowledge can all shorten the time that it will take to achieve these goals. So as you've probably caught by now, I work in the energy technology innovation space. So essentially what that means is we help to drive technologies, energy technologies, from lab to the market more quickly, so that we have more tools and better tools in our toolbox to help achieve climate targets. So this includes not just fostering new and emerging technologies, but also making existing technologies perform better and making them more affordable for end users. So it's clear that existing and emerging solutions aren't evolving fast enough. We're going to require concerted efforts to more clearly illuminate the pathways that are available to us that are still uncertain past 2030 as we head toward 2050. And we know that in the energy technology space, it can take years and even decades for technologies to mature, for them to move from the lab to the market, as I mentioned earlier. So renewables, for instance, like wind and solar, which are, you know, affordable today, that's largely because of the investments made in R&D and in demonstrating these technologies, in the past. So by investing today, we can ensure that we'll have the clean technologies that we'll need for tomorrow. Emerging technologies need to be scaled quickly to achieve deployment that is required for 2050 or net zero goals, not just in Canada, but around the world. The International Energy Agency has been very clear that up to half of the technologies needed to achieve net zero targets by 2050 are still in the development stage. So they still need investment in the innovation space in order to advance them through to scale. So what's more, in the energy space, emission-driven approach is incredibly important because energy technologies don't exist in a vacuum. Invention simply isn't enough. We need to think proactively about developing the policies and shaping the markets so that emerging clean technologies can compete with emissions-producing incumbents. So in terms of the work that we're doing within OERD at NRCan, or Natural Resources Canada, to further 2050 goals in terms of emission-driven innovation approach. Since about 2017, in OERD alone, we've programmed more than $1 billion in energy innovation investments. We deliver targeted energy research, development, and demonstration funding for the most environmentally and economically impactful technologies. This helps us to influence the pace and the direction of energy system transformation to empower and support energy technology innovators as well as adopters so they can advance and share their technologies and their knowledge. We have worked to develop strategic partnerships with other funding organizations such as Breakthrough Energy Ventures to facilitate collaboration and the co-funding of projects and to try to get more impact for investment. And our involvement in domestic and international energy innovation activities through initiatives such as Mission Innovation or the International Energy Agency really does help us contribute to broader government energy initiatives. So in addition to funding innovative clean energy projects, we also provide a range of complementary non-funding support. So this includes initiatives focused on the development of things like code, standards, regulations, expert input into strategic policy initiatives, facilitating connections with potential partners and investors and adopters, as well as connections to experts in our federal energy labs, as well as a number of other activities. We leverage our in-house expertise on science, technology, economics, and policy, as well as insights from funding hundreds of clean energy projects to identify these opportunities to amplify our funding support and provide tailored support to innovators. And so I'm going through all of these levers and telling you sort of all of the ways in which we do our work, because we have all of these in the back of our mind when we think about maximizing our impact. And so we within OERD target all of our activities, so everything that I've just talked to you about, against sort of 4 key missions. So we have 4 missions. One is improving energy efficiency in processes to reduce emissions from energy end use. Second mission is to accelerate electrification and maximize the benefits of low emitting heat and power. The third is to develop cleaner fuels pathways. And the fourth is to maintain safe and resilient energy systems and to protect Canadians in a changing energy landscape. So every time we do one of the activities that I've talked to you about, whether it's providing funding or investment to external organizations or innovators, whether it's supporting the work that's happening within our federal labs, whether it's engaging on a policy matter or providing some form of science or technical expertise, we make sure that it's oriented against one of these missions. So these missions are admittedly broad, but within them we have defined a number of focus areas where we can sort of more clearly align some of our work. And one of the things that we have done as well within OERD is to launch a series of prize-based challenges. So these are called our Impact Canada challenges. And they really are a good example of taking a mission-based approach. So the challenges leveraged specific targeted time-bound missions to drive innovations in key areas such as things like sustainable aviation fuel or energy storage. They enabled a more focused orientation of R&D efforts, and oriented towards solving some of the most challenging technical problems by convening not just government players, but external organizations as well. So this notion of really coalescing around shared objectives that I talked about earlier. So we've completed 6 challenges. We have a 7th underway, and it really provided the basis for us to sort of further build out the mission-oriented approach that I've talked about. So just in the 6 challenges alone, we engaged more than 1,500 stakeholders and received, more than 500 applications and funded more than about 70 organizations. So we found that this really helped us unlock new opportunities, helped us identify non-conventional solvers and solutions, and provided more opportunity for economic growth. And that works out well because I was just coming to the end. So thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions later. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Amanda. That's a really great scene setter and insight into how this kind of mindset and can be used in organizations to drive innovation and to really lead to kind of changes on the ground. I'm really taken by that phrasing that you put, that it has to be broad enough to involve people, the challenge, the mission, and kind of specific enough where you can kind of see action. And I think that's something that we are keen to kind of dig into in the Q&A session of this webinar, because I'm very keen to get an idea on how you strike that balance. So that's something I think we will come back to shortly. But next, I'm going to ask Rowan to share some opening thoughts on mission-based approaches. Rowan.
I'm going to put myself on a hard timer so that I don't go over, because I know I have the predilection sometimes to chat too long. I'm really excited to hear Amanda's really comprehensive approach to missions. I've been working in the space of mission-oriented innovation, and indeed my PhD is in mission-oriented innovation and design. And I've been looking at this area for probably the last 7 or 8 years, and have worked alongside Professor Mariana Mazzucato, as you said in my introduction. I am an observer, if you like, of government and government action, and I think a really key thing to recognize about this is that it can be very blurry. What is mission-oriented innovation? It seems kind of something you can't argue against, but actually there are some very specific issues related to mission-oriented innovation. And I think I was very interested in what Amanda just said there, where she effectively said it is a break from the norm. And I think that I can't emphasize enough that that's true of mission-oriented innovation. Mission-oriented innovation technically is innovation through government. Sometimes it's seen as innovation in government as complementary within it, but it is how government can act to catalyze markets. And this is very non-normative for government behaviors across the world. And so in many instances, it is always a challenge. Now, Amanda has outlined a whole suite of tools, and which I would highly recommend actually looking into the work of the Natural Resources Canada and other Canadian agencies actually around how you start to mechanize, if you like, mission-oriented innovation practice. But I can give you just a bit of a high-level view about, how governments can actually act and develop ecosystems for missions through their interactions. Because the first thing they need to really understand is that missions change the narrative, innovation, and the language we use. In theory, that means that missions direct innovation. I would say that government always directs action through its actions, so you can market shape by mistake as well as market shape on purpose. The fundamental role of mission-oriented innovation is that you are setting direction on purpose, and you're seeking then to actively co-create markets with the private sector and civil society. That means that you need to think differently about measurement. So we start changing our rules around static cost-benefit analysis and how we appraise projects. That again means that you probably need to think about that right at the beginning, so you don't then suddenly come to the end of a development process. The easy bit, I would say, is in the writing, what do you want to fix? The hard bit comes into understanding how you're going to gain a return, even if that return is not is a social return on investment, so you don't actually derive any financial return to government, but in some instances it will. I think we have lots to choose from. The SDGs, you know, we're in the middle of COP at the moment, set a huge landscape for transitions. And so institutions actually like Natural Resources Canada and other institutions play a really vital role in this. And I think different parts of the world have different kinds of institutional landscapes, and so therefore are ready or less ready for taking on this kind of action, because direction is not just, you know, hitting a start gun and saying go. You need the infrastructure in places, because if you're working towards a mission, fundamentally you're setting out a challenge that innovation needs to solve. In, you know, that might be clean energy, that might be dealing with novel entities in the water or the soil. It's always about bringing science and technology together with a problem and together with innovators to try and create new markets. That requires whole new sets of skills, you know, what we would call at IAPP dynamic capabilities, dynamic public sector capabilities in experimentation, working around collaboration, understanding how you coordinate things that may hit against traditional kind of IP rights and, you know, regulatory spaces, antitrust. You know, how do you work in pre-commercial spaces to start defining problems collaboratively with industry? Because otherwise you can set out actually very large scale procurement challenges, as opposed to really collaborating with the market to get the most novel innovations from the ecosystem. So market shaping, I think, is the thing that really needs to be understood. Sometimes you don't need to work with markets, and there's a whole other series of challenges around ex-novation, dealing with stranded assets, of, you know, how you actually understand through industrial policy. Some of that is about stimulating innovation, and some of that is about understanding what needs to then be retired or needs to be invested in, like circular economy infrastructure. And that's a whole other part of the role that government needs to play. But in the bit that is about mission-oriented innovation, market shaping is everything. And from what I would say, that's about entrepreneurialism government. So what is it to be a public entrepreneur? Understand effectuation and build effectuation skills. Fundamentally, what that means is attracting new markets, not just deploying kind of causal reasoning. We're going to put this amount of money in and then we expect to have a planned outcome. Mission-oriented innovation is trying to create outsized impact. If that's the case, you need to therefore attract resources, which is a fundamentally market shaping challenge. So there are lots of things that we need to focus on. We need to think about how we reimagine new non-profit institutions beyond the academy to get these you know, into the tricky challenges of planetary boundaries. There's too little on transformative innovation policy, which actually thinks beyond just fundamental research and then commercialization. And actually the really big challenges, especially in the environment, are how do we think about patient finance for deep tech and the kinds of things that will really take a while to become a commercial market. So there's lots we can do, and I am always very interested in the design processes, which I think Christina is going to talk about.
Thank you very much, Rowan. That's really interesting, and yeah, great segue. I've interrupted it when I shouldn't have done, but I'll let Christina jump off from that very point. Christina.
Thank you, Rowan. Really very, very interesting, all the work you're doing. So good morning and good evening, everyone. I've had the privilege to contribute to some of the large transformational projects with different governments in EMEA, but also in the US, Australia, and Asia. And in the last 5 years, I have also led the development of the IBM Garage for public sector, which is an end-to-end model for accelerating transformation and innovation for and through governments, as Amanda and Rowan mentioned. So we focus on how governments can be the catalysts for innovation and change across the public and private sectors. And in my introduction, I wanted also to reflect on the current situation we are living in the world. So Raquel, if you can move to the next chart. I just wanted to take a stake on the disruptive forces that are reshaping our society and the unique role of governments in this point of time. And you can see here on the screen some examples of these forces and series of events that are completely changing our macroeconomic environment and are changing this unique role of governments today. Next. So during the global pandemic, 4 key themes emerged as the top priorities in the agenda of government leaders around the world. And those were basically to regain trust from citizens and emerge stronger and more resilient from the pandemic to be better prepared for eventual future shocks, or what we call black swan events that can happen in the future and can affect the whole society. And those 4 themes that you see here included rapid innovation and agility. And here we started to see also the large importance of moonshot-based approaches to innovation in government. Second theme was around trust and transparency to raise the citizen trust indexes all over the world. We also saw security emerging, especially in the new domain of defense, which is cyberspace. And finally, talent and transformation, because governments acknowledge that they do not have the right skills and talent to succeed in this new digital era. And the pandemic was a kind of a wake-up call to all of us, showing that new forms of work, new forms of innovation and collaboration are possible and are here to stay. Next chart. In a nutshell, I wanted to share what we learned, and the global pandemic and the recent shocks in the world have taught us that innovation and transformation in government is a journey and not an event, and that a different and thoughtful approach is required where we will start small and scale after subsequent iterations. And above all, we learned that building trust is the key success factor, so every iteration needs to deliver quick wins. In this context, moonshot innovation thinking is the right approach for governments to start with these small iterative steps and target ambitious goals. Next, we say that moonshot thinking is this innovation approach where we target ambitious goals and typically 10 times larger goals than with traditional approaches. And this innovation approach shifts the mindset, and it empowers a team of people to look for unconventional solutions, thus starting from first principles and starting small by leveraging on fast-paced experimentation. And we see also many methods usually adopted in other domains. So we also use the innovation horizon model with governments to define such a moonshot opportunity. So the horizon model looks at the level of unknown in each opportunity. And while currently the government's bread and butter are still horizon 1 opportunities, looking at known problems with known solutions, our breadth and depth in areas of technology, design, industry, and research also allow us to explore all horizons to create new products and services within the core business of the government, and to partner with the broader ecosystem, involving also the private sector, to create new business platforms adjacent to our core government business, or leverage large research organizations to look into the future of government. So this is typically how we operate. And in the IBM garage for public sector, as the name also invites to think, a garage is a place, is an inspirational place, either physical or virtual, where we develop innovation. And the model that I have worked in, we have worked with different opportunities spanning from Horizon 1 to Horizon 4. And we help governments transform the way they onboarded service providers, for example, which was a massive time sink for their organizations to realize cost and time savings. And we also went into Horizon 3 and 4 with different government organizations. I will cite an example here, a recent example with the US Department of Defense, where we developed a joint artificial development center, where we developed AI and machine learning models using government and public data sources to predict disease spread and address other pandemic-related challenges. such as situational awareness of hospital, bed availability, and so on. So this multiplied goals and returns by far more than 10 times and was considered a mission-critical moonshot project and a Horizon 4 innovation, just to cite one example and make it a little bit more tangible, because as Rowan mentioned at the beginning, sometimes it gets a little bit blurry when we define what we understand by moonshot-based innovation. In the next chart, there is also another example of moonshot innovation. This is what we call cognitive government. And we have a reference model architecture on how the future government should look like in terms of intelligent workflows to serve citizens and to serve the wider communities, and also the use of technology, business platforms, and ecosystem collaboration. So I will not go deeper into that, but if you are interested, also please feel free to reach out and I can provide some documents, some thought leadership that we published around the cognitive government. In the next chart, I wanted to summarize the main concept behind the IBM Garage for public sector, and it is that we drive innovation and transformation that you can see and you can measure. So here the KPIs are very important to measure progress and measure the returns on the investment. And the work and outcomes are transparent and on display for the whole government organization and the broader ecosystem that participates, so that they can witness over time the progress and how we are meeting our goals. We define the moonshot we want to accomplish, but we always start small with one initiative, and squads and executives learn new ways of working by doing the work. And then we have the ceremonies that are governed to ensure speed to value is not impeded. And when the garage creates new value, we plan for a scale. And we bring this behavior and characteristics of a startup, so the speed and human-centered model, within the structure of an enterprise, so that we can scale and implement on this broader context. In the next chart, there is also a summary of what involves our IBM Garage framework, because every government has the ingredients, but we have the recipe, which is the IBM Garage for public sector recipe. So it's the operating model, is how it all comes together. And usually our model involves having this physical location, which inspires on the art of the possible and creates an environment to share openly, but also virtual collaboration tools to co-create with our government clients. And rather than being an IT shop, like spitting out random acts of digital transformation to help the organization with point solutions, the IBM Garage is a vehicle to create a partnership with the government and with this broader ecosystem around the government. And we are looking to help governments drive the transformation throughout the core processes, leveraging platforms, expertise in applied technology, new ways of working, such as agile, design thinking for public sector, lean startup, and always with the right people and capabilities to create this culture of transformation. So we have key 3 principles: ingredients, which are brought by our clients, then the recipe, co-creation, because it's not something done to governments, but done together with governments. So we always talk about co-creation and cooperation, and having always this best person for the job, because we combine experts in innovation management and then agile design thinking and so on, but also experts on moonshot approach for government clients. So it's domain and industry expertise intersection. And then maybe in the next 2 charts very quickly, there is like an overall view, and I will make this available also after the call, on what are like the key principles in the operating model. And in the next chart, just to dive a little bit deeper into the methodology, as I said, our process for taking an opportunity from problem definition all the way to scale product in market. So we split it up into 3 key phases: co-create, where we use the hypothesis-driven validation techniques and the adoption of a lean startup methodology to define the problem space and validate the key problems that are faced by our users. And we move to the co-execution, where we follow the mantra of measure, learn, quickly building experiments and doing market testing to validate the solutions. And we We do this also in order to build and deploy a minimum viable product to market, ensuring we have clear measures of success that we will use to validate the product fit into the environment. So this is not a waterfall process. An initiative can enter the garage at any one of these stages, as long as we ensure that the requisites of each stage have been met. And likewise, it's not a design upfront to build at the end. We have design happening throughout all stages to allow us to pivot and move as we see the market's reaction to the solutions that we are forming. And for us, here it's very important, this notion, as I mentioned, of co-creation, co-execution, cooperation, having continuous feedback, and then starting with these small iterations, but having in mind the moonshot, so the scale that we want to achieve at the end. And in the next chart, I wanted to share with you one example of moonshot innovation, another one as the one I mentioned before. So here we were also dreaming big on these more than 10 times goals when we entered the innovation process. And this happened also during the pandemic, and that was an intense period of innovation, and in collaboration with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy and the US Department of Energy, IBM have launched the COVID-19 High Performance Computing Consortium with an unprecedented computing power, which was more than 100 times the computing power that any consortia could have at that time. And this consortium is unique private-public effort, spearheaded by the White House Office and IBM, to bring together federal government, industry, and academic leaders who are volunteering free compute time and resources on their world-class machines. So the consortium members and affiliates manage a range of computing capabilities, from small clusters to some of the largest supercomputers in the world. And they offer not only computational resources, but also software, services, and deep technical expertise to help researchers execute complex computational research programs. Just to give you a rough idea, the public-private collaboration now has 43 members, national labs, universities, and tech companies like IBM, and many typically also industry rivals to IBM, like including Amazon Web Services and Dell and Microsoft and others. So together, we've given researchers worldwide free access to powerful computing resources that they normally wouldn't have. And the consortium has sped up and enabled dozens of projects around the world, from drug design to analyzing the propagation of the virus, to splitting ventilators between multiple patients, to optimizing healthcare services around the world. So I've learned personally a lot during the last 5 years, and especially during this global pandemic period, about how to address like the big problems of humanity in collaboration. So having governments as this catalyst for change. And in my mind, one lesson that cannot be ignored is that we have the need for more innovation and strategic collaborations across institutions and sectors, and the right approach is the moonshot-based innovation. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much, Christina. That's really fascinating and some real very pertinent and great examples of the kind of innovation that kind of kicked off the genesis of this conversation around the pandemic and the challenges that government has to respond to. So that really helps provide some fantastic examples of what this kind of approach can unlock. And I think that's really what we want to kind of explore a little bit more in this kind of question and answer portion of the webinar. And if you do have any questions that you would like to put to the panel, please do share them with me. I can see we've had one in already, but please, if you have any thoughts, do share them in the Q&A box, and we do have time to put them to the panel. I'm going to use my slight chair's prerogative to follow up on a few of the interesting comments in those presentations in the first instance. Amanda, I mentioned that your point about the missions having to be broad enough, but then also specific enough, caught my ear. you then set out the four missions that you kind of have agreed. I mean, how did you determine them? How big a process is it for an organization to decide what the missions are that they're going to focus on?
Yeah, so it's a really good question. So I would say the four missions that I outlined are really sort of our broad overarching missions for the whole organization. And we developed these, gosh, probably about 3 years ago now. Time flies in a global pandemic. But we really engaged all of the employees that work in OERD in my office. So we have, as I mentioned, engineers, scientists, policy specialists, economists, and so on. So we put them in a room quite literally and sort of talked through. We had a process where we went through, what are the things that we do? How can we boil it down? So those four missions they're fairly broad, but they were the best distillation we had in terms of what are the core things that we do. Now, my comment about sort of trying to right size missions and make them broad enough that they're ambitious while still being focused enough that what you're aiming for. I think what was in my mind when I was speaking of that was the work that we did to come up with the scoping of the Impact Canada challenges that we launched. So these prize-based challenges, where a big part of designing these challenges was going out and talking literally to dozens and sometimes hundreds of people about what they thought, and trying to inspire people and make people want to reach for something audacious, while also recognizing that we're within a government context, and there's a whole other webinar on this probably, where there are certain parameters, that you need to abide by, whether those are things like, well, my program is 4 years long, I am getting the money in this amount, for each year, and I'm not able to roll money over from one fiscal year to the next. People in government will be familiar with this problem, or certainly not without a lot of permissions. I think we found the sweet spot, but it is, you want to inspire, but you don't want to make it so, so out of this world that it's impossible within a government frame. So I think a lot of talking, a lot of being willing to push the boundaries a little bit in government to try to get some flexibilities where they might exist, and a lot of crossed fingers.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, while it occurs to me, what do you do if the missions are in tension? Because there's always a lot of different stakeholders in government, and that's a day-to-day business. When you've kind of categorized something as a mission, do those tensions become more difficult to manage?
Well, I mean, I think there's always, you're never going to make everybody happy, is just sort of a good rule to live by in life, but try to make as many, at least not upset as you can. So I think that's really the value in the broad scale engagement that we do in the course of like developing the challenges, for example. So, we had some consultation to boil it down to, these are the broad areas that we're going to do challenges in. So we want to do something in sustainable aviation fuel, or we want to do something in advancing women in entrepreneurs in clean tech. So you come up with the general idea, but then do the consultation and the engagement to sort of solicit views, like figure out where are the gaps that need to be filled, or where is that sweet spot where you think you can have an impact with the tools that you have and the partners that you have to actually make a difference, because you don't want to do something that everybody else is already working on. There's no point in pulling this lever if you're just going to do something that everyone else has done. So I think just talking through the constellation of individuals and organizations that are interested in a particular space sort of helps you land somewhere where people can feel comfortable. And even if it's not where they might have wanted it to land initially, they were part of the process that got you there. So they can at least see, hopefully, sort of what the thought process was that led you to land where you did.
And Rowan, and then I'll bring in Christina. We've been talking about big challenges to governments that are kind of suited to this approach. Is that the best way to look at missions, that they tackle the big challenges, or can can anything be missionized, for want of a better word? You know, can governments use this approach kind of on perhaps something that's more conventional, more day to day for civil servants? Rowan?
So I mean, I would say that you probably can get too many missions, and that could become a problem. I've seen a challenge of, you know, at what level is a mission being set? You know, we have the EU missions and the Horizon 2020 budget in the EU, which has set up 5 key missions, which is catalyzing lots of activity underneath it. But then you see institutions also setting out particular missions. You see nation states setting out missions. You see organizations setting out missions. I'm currently working with an industry body focusing on missions, particularly for the challenges that operate in the sector that they work in, which is in the chemical sector. So there's something very interesting about what is the mechanism of a mission. I mean, a mission effectively loses salience if you can't do anything. So it is an action-oriented approach. I think that usually it is accompanied by some kind of resources that are going to be deployed towards innovation in that space. So you do need to kind of have money, or at least access to money. You need to have a problem that needs to be solved, and then you need to have actors who are going to collaborate in the system. I think, you know, you can have a sort of isomorphic mimicry. It is a, you know, sorry to use this sort of fancy phrasing, but, you know, the challenge of isomorphic mimicry is effectively that you can copy and paste all of the, you know, mission-oriented innovation post, you know, words, and then actually you just get old wine in new bottles, because you haven't really done the hard work that Amanda is signaling, which is you have to actually do this outreach, you have to do the collaboration with industry, you have to ask new things of industry, which might ask industry to change. And that's where you're getting into some quite challenging pieces about conditionality and those kinds of things in your procurement. But so I don't know that there's a particular sweet spot that says this is the scale it has to operate at, but not everything can be missions. They have to be distinctive.
Christina, do you want to come in on that point as well?
Yes, I fully agree with the points raised by Amanda and Rowan. So I believe the most important is that, of course, you need to have a problem that you want to solve, and there should be this high reward. So when I showed you also the Horizon model, so we typically see moonshot thinking at Horizon 3 and Horizon 4, which means that you will do some reinvention and you will have applied research involved, because this is typically what will get you to the return of 10 times return, or achieve more than 10 times the goals compared to a traditional approach of innovation management. So when we see right now that many governments and many also private sector organizations are working on digital transformation, this would be Horizon 2 and Horizon 1, because we see a lot of process automation involved. We see digitalization in the sense that we set up applications so that we can move from paper to digital data, and then manage a high volume of data. But these are like incremental innovation, incremental steps. So when we talk about moonshot, typically is like an overarching mission, which might have also as part of it some smaller transformations. But the moonshot aims to have this reinventing or setting a very high bar on the research space. And also typically the projects that I've been involved, you have multiple stakeholders, as you were mentioning, multiple tensions and complexity, and you need also like this experiment-based approach, like prototyping and having over a period of time also like different milestones achieved, probably for different stakeholders in the mission. So that's that's for me what characterizes the moonshot thinking. And then of course the measurement of this very high reward in an unknown time frame, because we want to have a kind of a quick time to market, but this is not typically the case when you are in a moonshot thinking innovation. So the speed to value when you start developing is unknown, but you are certain that it will have a high reward at the end of the process.
Thank you very much. And we're going to take the questions from the audience now, because we're getting a number of those in. Thank you very much to everybody who is contributing, and please do still do so. I'll take one from Monty Weisel-Mayer. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing your name right, Monty, that kind of picks up on something that Amanda alluded to. So I'll go to her in the first instance to get the response, and then go round the panel. How do you avoid some of the pitfalls that government has of thinking in 4-year budget cycles? I mean, you alluded to that budgetary challenge, Amanda. Have you solved it?
I wish. I think we've made progress though. So I mean, first of all, let's acknowledge upfront, like in a democratic system, like, you know, having a 4-year cycle is not, you know, it's a small price to pay for, you know, people getting to vote. That said, it can, when you're in an area that can have longer time horizons. So an area like, you know, energy technology innovation that I talked about, where, you know, science takes time, R&D takes time. R&D on some of these technologies can take even longer. So 4-year cycles can be problematic. So a couple of things that we've done to try to get over that barrier is, first of all, just explain, like have the evidence, have the analysis, talk to people who make these decisions, and explain why. It's important, why the certainty is important, why the timeframes are important, and you know, do the heavy lifting to build the evidence base. So we've done a number of retrospective studies that go back and look at investments going all the way back, for example, to the 70s when this organization started, that sort of tell the retrospective story over time of how investments built on each other, and how you know, you really can see the trail of the impact that government investment can have. That said, we've been a bit more successful lately. The last couple of budget decisions, we've had a 7-year horizon, which, you know, is long in government, and we've had we're fortunate to get some ongoing funding as well, which means, you know, there's money every single year. So I would say just tell the story, do the work to establish the evidence base, talk to people who matter, and explain why it's important. And if you can't get that sort of leeway for everything that you do, explain why it's particularly important in certain spaces. So if you're doing mission-oriented innovation or doing a prize-based challenge, why is it important that you're able to maybe jump over those year-over-year fiscal year constraints, so that you can inspire a little bit some out-of-the-box thinking.
And Rowan, we often report here at Global Government Forum on kind of the impact that kind of what in the UK we call the Treasury view, kind of Treasury orthodoxy. It has been the recent cliche in terms of they're not, I think it's fair to say, overly keen on funding prototypes. They do like to know what's going to come out at the end of it, generally, finance ministries. Does there need to be a change in how governments think about funding projects for these kind of approaches to be kind of the most successful?
Yes, I could just end it there. But I think that the challenge of febrile political cycles, and you're just about to go into the midterms in the US, and there's also been a giant package of measures that has gone through in the US, which is allocating extremely large resources, I think over 500 billion in resources towards infrastructure in the US. And at the same time, we're in this kind of really hotbed of kind of pivoting political, and sometimes that becomes quite populist. It's very hard to run missions in a populist environment. At the same time, we're not technocrats. You know, we, as Amanda says, we have democratic hopes for our nations, and so you need to be able to navigate that as the public entrepreneur, if you like, the organized. That means we do need organizations. I'm a big advocate in some way to think about how we connect to the SDGs. The SDGs have an impact horizon of 2030. If we're doing that, then why don't we work with an impact horizon of 2030? Because it is governments and their nationally determined contributions, specifically to climate change and climate innovation, that are counted, you know, in the global sphere, you know. So that's part of democracy, is not just. And I think there's a huge amount of you know, finance department capture of the political economy, you know, which is really problematic. We've we see everything in you know, cost benefit analyses, and not everything fits cost benefit analyses. Sometimes, you know, it's very instructive working in the chemical sector, because it's long, deep technology that takes a really long time just to do the testing. It can take, you know, 2 years to understand what you need to test. Now, to do that can't work in the same level of, you know, so sustainable aviation fuels, for example, is the kind of that same kind of thing, where we can, you know, wax lyrical about jet zero and get very boostering in a kind of political domain, but actually it's hard, dogged work to really take that conversion and work with industry deeply towards what is it to retire fleets, to safely move fleets out and get the right kinds of conversion practices in, so that you actually are moving towards this new era. And we've seen some of these challenges with things like electrification of vehicles, as we've assumed the market will fill a gap where actually government probably needed institutions which weren't there to do some of that work. So I think that we have to be thinking about impact horizons. It's really imperative then that you think about shoring up certain things without it becoming static. You know, it still needs to remain dynamic, it needs to be adaptive, but it's mission oriented, so it's going to try and fix something or solve a problem. That's the whole point.
Christina, do you want to come in on how funding matches up with missions?
Yes, I think this is a fascinating subject, and this is also the reason why at the beginning of my introduction I put this horizons model, because I think that we need to understand like the overarching innovation model that we are discussing today, this moonshot oriented innovation or mission based innovation. This is a way of thinking big, but of course it has different phases as well. So it's not that you move from nothing to everything, but you have different phases, different milestones, and then it's the combination also of smaller objectives or smaller horizon programs, like in this scale between Horizon 1 and Horizon 4. So you need the combination of all of this. And then, of course, we have the constraints, the 4-year constraint in government, but it's more and more frequent when we plan this kind of moonshot programs. We take a scale of 5 up to 10 years. And then I think Rowan also mentioned, we see all the recovery and resilient facilities and stimulus in many governments around the world at national level, but also, for example, in Europe, the European Commission has launched this 1 trillion increased budget for the 6 years to drive also economic recovery and resilience across governments in Europe. So more and more, and because the problems we are tackling are more challenging, we need to be able to work on these time frames that will have, of course, some milestones within the 4-year time frame, but will span beyond that, so that we can also leverage all these funds, unprecedented funds that are now available for government to build, to be building these core capabilities that will help us to be better prepared for the future.
Fantastic. And we've got another question here from Himansu Pandey. Apologies again if I'm not quite pronouncing that right. I'm going to put this to Rowan in the first instance, given her her work at the at UCL. How do you boost the capacity of government employees to undertake mission innovation? What skills can we give public servants to kind of embrace this approach?
Well, I think that actually this also signals the final question that you have around finding the people, but I won't preempt that because that's a question for Amanda. But actually, and Christina illustrated this too, which is learning by doing is a really important element to this, you know. And so actually, one of the things that we observed, or certainly I observed when running the Mission Oriented Innovation Network, was that there was a distinct lack of precedence. And we have got to a stage in sort of public sector capacity building that there's been this sort of expectation that there will be a model that can be copied and then delivered, you know. And so you see the export of, you know, the Finnish model of you know, doing education going into a different geographic region because it's been proven through PISA to be you know, best practice. You have a challenge, a gap of best practices, if you like, in mission orientation. And they are very much solutions oriented, team-based activities, you know. So actually, as Christina was describing, the role that design can play in actually bringing together stakeholders to engage around a solution, there are those kinds of skills. But then there's also the kind of operationalizing, and I think there are some really interesting labs and living labs, lighthouse projects that have started to exemplify what it means to really work together to try and solve problems. I do still think there's a funding challenge there, because you often find that these lighthouse problems come to the end of a cliff, and that there's no actual business model that's been really well developed to actually undertake what happens next. And I do think some of this starts with collaborative skills, but I think there's a really strong need for research into the people like Amanda who are doing this work, just to keep learning about how to do this so that we are learning from existing practice, because it's quite novel. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will move it to Amanda next and extend it to that question that is for you in the questions, which is, how do you find the people that are important to talk to? So that's a kind of very specific question for you, if you want to kind of start on that and kind of expand it out in terms of the skills that public servants need.
Sure. Maybe if it's okay, I'll start with the public servants just to pick up on what Rowan said. So, I mean, agree completely with all of the points that she made. And I would say, just from our own experience, like there are no templates. Like you can talk to people who have done similar things, but you have to be able to and find the people to work with you who are able to go out to talk to people, to kind of pick those little nuggets out of, you know, the various experiences that any number of people or organizations will have had, and just be thoughtful about how they could apply in your own domain. And I think there is also, you know, you can't say too much about the need for curiosity, but also working in a government context. I think I would be remiss to say that you need people. It can't just be people who want to go break the system and change everything. It has to be people who understand as well how the system works, because understanding how the system works enables you to do what I sometimes call the fun things, to go outside of the box and sort of push the boundaries. And you do that by showing why it's important. I always say start small, like don't bite off more than you can chew. I think you have the most success if you can start sort of with a very fine scoped project and demonstrate success and let it snowball from there. To turn to the other question in terms of how to find the people, and I think that was probably in reference to when I said how to get over the 4-year cycles, you know, like talk to people, show them how you're working. Again, that's in a government context, at least. I think that part of that is knowing the system. So in the Canadian government, and I suspect all national level governments are the same, there will be, you know, sort of central agencies or focal points. So whether that's, you know, in Canada, that's the Privy Council Office and the Department of Finance. In the US, that would be, you know, with the White House. In, you know, in the UK, there's different structures. I'm not going to run through them all, but finding those people and just, you know, be willing to work in some of the lessons that you've learned or some of the evidence that you've found wherever you can do so. I'll stop there. So I know we have more questions.
Yeah, on this point about boosting capability in public sector, I am a believer that it's very important to cooperate with companies such as IBM, where we have this IBM garage for public sector, because we have, as I said, we have the recipe. So the government has all the ingredients, but we need maybe to put some structure around it so that we can orchestrate all the contributions also from outside government, that we can train further skills also into government employees. And in this sense, in IBM, there is a DNA on innovation, because we have for 29 consecutive years been leading the list of patents, so number of patents received annually, and last year we had more than 8,000 patents, and I think this DNA needs to be kind of injected into some government organizations, this reinvention and innovation DNA, and that's why I think the partnerships we've done became so successful, because we really put this framework, this environment to co-create, and then we trained government employees on technologies, but we trained them through these new ways of thinking, new ways of collaborating, also beyond the public sector with the private sector. So I think that this collaborative model is especially important when you want to attract ideas and when you want diversity of ideas on the table to think big and go into this moonshot approach.
That's great. We've got time for a couple more questions. I may not be able to get to all of them, but thank you to everybody who has provided questions for the session. I really do appreciate it. There's one that came in at the start, which I should really touch on. We've kind of mentioned a little bit about the kind of the value of international examples, but there was a question that is, what is the place of international technology or research collaboration in mission-oriented approaches? Amanda, with your work on the Mission Innovation Steering Committee, I thought perhaps you would have some thoughts on kind of where you can get the value, I guess, from those international approaches rather than just copying them wholesale.
Yeah, sure. And I'll try to be quick. So I think when you're in an R&D or an innovation space, there are just natural opportunities for collaboration, regardless if it's international or domestic, because there are so many cross-cutting elements. In an international space, when you're looking at something like energy, technology, innovation, to help address climate goals, I think there's even more opportunity, because we know there will be certain things that all nations or many nations will need to do to advance goals. We don't need, researchers in many countries working on exactly the same problem. So where that there is something that we will need to do for the globe, essentially, where you can align, and that's what mission innovation is doing. So there, in mission innovation now, there are missions where there are public-private initiatives that have a stated mission. So Canada co-leads carbon dioxide removal mission. It has a stated goal of removing 100 megatons of carbon dioxide from the air in 10 years. So countries come together and try to figure out what are the specific areas where there will be the most impact from working together to accelerate that work. So I think there's lots that can be done. Maybe another example I'll just mention quickly, it's not mission innovation, but it was enabled by it, was work that we did with the UK, the Department for Business, something and industrial strategy. I'm sorry, apologies to my UK colleagues, where we did a joint Impact Canada challenge, so on smart energy systems, so where we worked together to frame up the problem and then brought in Canadian and British innovators to work together to help solve the issue or address the issue. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Amanda. Rowan, do you have any thoughts on the best way to get the international highlights, best practice, and how to apply them?
I think it's a much bigger issue than we give it credit for, actually. Because it goes to one of the first questions, which was about like how big can a mission be and who's setting these missions, where many of the problems that we're dealing with are not really subject to national borders, and so you're really in this question of like who and how are we responding to major problems that we're, I don't know, like antimicrobial resistance being, when you're trying to deal with something like that, you really want to mobilize the greatest capacity of research and technology to solve the problem. But that problem is a problem of global scale, and so I think that one of those things is about better collaboration across research institutes, but then there's also the question of how we have better visibility. And so I would push for, which is a long-term bugbear of mine, which is that the firewall behind academic publications just should be, absolutely obliterated, because the access to international technology and research information should be far more ubiquitously available and should be seen as public interest technology. There's too much that is behind both firewall and also is in under commercial or IP. So we'll have to unlock an awful lot of that for us to solve some of the challenges of our time. But there is absolutely a core role in science, technology, and innovation research playing part of solving missions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I fully agree with you, Rowan, that this is a large problem that maybe we don't give it enough credit. But international collaboration will be key in the next years, and there's still much to do. And I see it particularly nowadays in the defense and intelligence industry and in the cybersecurity industry, the work we are doing with government. So whenever we have the chance to collaborate, and I participated in some joint initiatives between different governments in Europe, like NATO countries collaborating on cybersecurity, the results are amazing when we join forces, but it's still difficult, and there's a lot of policy regulation that we need to change to be able to collaborate in sensitive matters across international borders. So I think that this will be also a hot topic of the next time. We could dedicate another roundtable to this topic, and especially now also with the complexities of the war that we have in Europe. We see for defense and intelligence cooperation is very critical.
I think we're going to have to bring the session to a close momentarily. I just want to quickly go through the panel to get some closing thoughts on the session. I think it's been an absolutely fascinating discussion. It's absolutely flown by. We've had what I'm going to characterize as a provocative questioning that I'm going to use as the jumping off point for our closing comments, which I will summarize as somebody asking, can governments really lead innovation? They seem to be bureaucratic and inefficient. Can you prove to me that I am wrong? As a jumping off point for our final thoughts, we have slightly touched on kind of how we measure benefits and things like that. Amanda, first, for any closing thoughts, how do you prove that this approach works?
So my answer to the question is yes, obviously. I believe the governments can be innovative, and I don't know how to prove it other than to say, I think that there is a lot of evidence that this can be the case. I think that something I would pose back to the questioner is certainly governments doing things the way that they've always done them doesn't work very well either a lot of the time. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to always try to improve. And overall, I just think this has been a fantastic discussion, and I've really appreciated it. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Rowan, any closing thoughts?
Well, I think in 2017, I wrote a report called Move Fast and Fix Things, How to Be a Public Entrepreneur. And so I think what we were doing with that project was digging out examples of innovation through government that was using, novel ideas and methods like challenge prizes, like collaborations using public procurement in interesting ways. Now, I don't think that, I'm loath to suggest that any part of our kind of innovation ecosystem is perfect. And I also don't think that you should bluntly say government should do everything, because that's a ridiculous thing to say. But I think government has got an accountability and statutory responsibility to solve public problems. And sometimes we forget that. That's part of their political mandate. So it's not just to be efficient, it is also to solve public challenges. They should do that in an efficient way. But if we malign them as bureaucratic and say, oh, well, the private sector will do everything, well, that's not true. We need a pluralistic set of actors in our system to try and do it. We could all improve. So I can't necessarily prove you wrong, but I would say I've seen some really good examples around the world, from Finland to Northern Ireland to the United States to places in Latin America doing really good work in this kind of sphere.
And hopefully this session has highlighted just some of those as well. Christina, any closing comments?
Yes, I am convinced that governments have a key role in leading in innovation. Another thing is that maybe in the past we didn't have the challenges we have right now on the table, but with the current challenges and the complexity of those challenges, we need governments who are in a leading position and in a governing position to boost this innovation mindset across all the society and within national boundaries and across borders, as we said, with international collaboration, because the magnitude of the issues we have right now is so huge and unprecedented that we really need this leadership from the government leaders to make sure that there is an orchestration in a very profound movement across all layers of the society. So and also I agree with my colleagues, with the co-panelists here, Amanda and Rowan, that we have plenty of examples. And if we look at what has been happening in governments across the world in the last 3-4 years, there has been this acceleration of initiatives related to many fundamental topics, to the healthcare, to the climate change, to supply chain management, the talent, the race for talent, the citizen experience, so how citizens interact now with governments and how we did maybe 10 years ago. So there is a revolution going on, and I enjoyed very much today's roundtable, and I believe that we need to keep pushing. So believers like us, we need to keep pushing and promoting innovation in government.
Yes, indeed. That's a great place on which to end, on both the scale of the challenge and the vitality of the response to it from government. Thank you, Christina. And that is where I'm going to have to bring today's session to a close. I think that's been an excellent discussion. Thank you very much to all of our panel for joining us today, and for everybody watching along, and thank you for submitting the questions. Apologies if we didn't get a chance to respond to all of them. Thanks to IBM for joining us as our knowledge partner today. You will be receiving a recording of this session when that is available in the next few days, and there will be a report on the webinar on the Global Government Forum website in the next few weeks too. Before that, though, there is a survey that should be appearing in your inbox shortly to get your thoughts on today's session. It would really help me and the team here at Global Government Forum to make sure that we're providing you with the best possible content if you could fill that in. And any ideas on topics you'd like to see us cover in future webinars would also be welcome, and that would make my job a lot easier. This is one of a number of webinars that we host here at the Global Government Forum, and you will see the one of the next ones mentioned on that slide, Streamline Support, Bringing Government Payments into the Digital Era. It's also on a kind of innovation topic, and how do governments make sure that they support payments on or benefit payments that they pay to citizens are kind of modern and up to date, and can respond to what I've already alluded to as a kind of age of permanent crisis, which needs governments to act very quickly often to make payments to their citizens. So please do join us for that webinar, which is sure to be a fascinating discussion also, and you can see the full list of webinars on the Global Government Forum website, globalgovernmentforum.com. So once again, thanks to everybody for coming along to this webinar session today, and we hope to see you at another one very soon. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.